Hey, Fight fans, it's Michelle Joy Phelps with Title Sports Network, and I'm happy to be joined now by the one and only Dan Rafael, my co-host for today's show. Dan, thank you for joining me here in Saudi as we discuss and preview the 5 versus 5 card this weekend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't wait for the show. I've been watching some of the pre-fight activities, took a look at the press conference, and if you're a boxing fan, you're not pumped up for this show, I don't know if I actually consider you a boxing fan.
There's a lot to look forward to, but before we get on to the 5 versus 5 card, what I really want to talk to you about is an update on the IBF situation. From my understanding, I sat down with Eddie Hearn just a few hours ago, and I got an opportunity to ask him a bit about it, like what's going on there, and what's the likelihood that we're going to see Filip Hergovich versus Daniel Dubois for the IBF title this weekend. And one of the things that he said was he's not very confident that it will be for this particular fight, unfortunately. But do you have any updates?
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of perspective. If you think it's fortunate or unfortunate, I would look at it as, I guess, fortunate, because it means that Alexander Usyk is still going to be the undisputed champion, which he should be because he earned it by beating Tyson Fury in the boxing ring only 2 weeks ago. But in terms of what will take place on Saturday, there had been, as we discussed in a previous show, an agreement by all involved. Some may dispute the gravity of that agreement, but that everybody sort of understood that this title was going to become vacant. Probably last Saturday was when it was supposed to be, and that Saturday's fight between Daniel Dubois and Filip Hergovich would in fact be for the vacant IBF title. Now, I don't think, based on the people I have talked to just in the last couple hours, that that's going to be the case, as you just said. Most likely, again, it's a fluid situation. By the time this video goes up, it could have changed. But most likely, the scenario is going to be the following: that Hergovich and Dubois will fight Saturday, obviously, and it will wind up being sanctioned for the interim IBF title. And the way that they can deal with that in terms of the IBF rules, because technically speaking, Alexander Usyk is on a medical suspension based on what occurred in the Tyson Fury fight until sometime in July. So they will consider him unavailable to do anything for the next few months. So therefore, this will become an interim title. And what happens after that still remains to be seen, of whether eventually the winner of Saturday's fight will become the IBF champion, because obviously Usyk's next fight is supposed to be against Tyson Fury. They had a 2-fight contract. That's always been announced publicly. And just this week, Turki Al-Sheikh went on his social media and not only said that they're having a rematch, but he said what the date was going to be, that it's going to be December 21st, which is a further back than the original thought process, which was October 12th, which frankly felt a little bit soon after that very difficult fight that both of these men had 2 weeks ago. So to sum up, Saturday's fight most likely going to be for the interim IBF title.
Right. Another thing I had actually asked Eddie Hearn was what happens if an injury is sustained? What happens? Like we're looking at September 20th, is it 21st? That for the Anthony Joshua fight card in Wembley. This would make the very first fight that Anthony Joshua would have at Wembley Stadium without any belts on the line. And I asked him, what happens if Daniel Dubois or Filip Hergovich suffer an injury, depending on who wins, and what does that, or where does that leave things for Anthony Joshua? And he said, well, there are many options. There could be Joseph Parker, another rematch with Joseph Parker, even a Deontay Wilder fight if Deontay looks really good this weekend.
I think those are all possibilities. And I frankly, I don't see what the big deal is from the perspective of that. If Anthony Joshua was fighting at Wembley, it has to be for a world title or some type of title. Anthony Joshua has legions and legions of fans who have come out to see him and support him and watch his fights, title or no title. So I don't know if that's the end all be all. I'm a little skeptical that it would be Deontay Wilder. I say that only because if he is the winner on Saturday against Zhang and he comes away with no injuries, Turki Al-Sheikh has already said that the plan would be to have Deontay Wilder go on to the card that Riyadh Season is doing in Los Angeles on August the 3rd and match him up with the up-and-coming American heavyweight with Top Rank, Jared Anderson. That is a fight that the Top Rank and Jared Anderson team says they are willing to take and I guess have an outline of a deal in place. And in talking with Deontay Wilder's manager, Shelley Finkel, I asked him about that same situation. His perspective was, hey, listen, we're concerned and focused and thinking about what's taking place on Saturday. But if Deontay Wilder does what we think he's supposed to do, which is win the fight, and he does come away uninjured, if that's what Turki Al-Sheikh wants, and obviously we work with them plenty of times. We're more than happy to make that deal, and we're happy to take that fight. So that may be the next step before a Joshua fight. Obviously, if Turkey changes his mind and there's an issue, maybe we will see that fight. But I still suspect that Joshua is going to wind up fighting the winner of the winner of Dubois against Hergovich, be it for the interim title or perhaps because of the time that it will occur, they'll be going forward with the rematch between Fury and Usyk, and at that point could become for the full IBF title.
Right. Just out of curiosity, Dan, from a fight fan's perspective, do you feel that Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder still has the same selling appeal?
Absolutely not. I mean, a few years ago, this was a fight that would have been for the undisputed title when Anthony had 3 of the belts, and it was Deontay that had the WBC belt. Not only would it have been for the undisputed title, both of them were still undefeated. And at that point in time, it would have been an absolutely gargantuan fight. Now, that's not to say that it's still not a highly significant fight, a fight that a lot of people would want to see. Perhaps it could have a title at stake in it, depending on, as we just talked about, with what's going to happen with the IBF belt. So it's still a significant fight. And I think there's still a fight that a lot of folks are going to want to see, particularly, if Deontay Wilder performs on Saturday and wins and does so impressively, scores, the big knockout that we've all become accustomed to seeing when Deontay Wilder is in the ring. But it will never be what it should have been. It will never be 2 undefeated men in their prime fighting for the undisputed title. It just can't ever happen again. And it's very unfortunate, and it's really a shame that we never got to see it at that level of meaning. It doesn't mean it can't still happen. It just will never carry that meaning as long as they never fought back then.
What a shame that we didn't have Turkey Al-Sheikh at that time
I mean,
to kind of pull all sides together.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to make it apparently at various times, and depending on who you believe, I've always given both sides fault for different reasons at different times for it not happening. And then the real shame of it is they did actually sign contracts to have the fight. Joshua, had to win his fight, and Deontay had to win his fight that took place in December, and they were on the same card together. And Deontay Wilder went out there and looked atrocious and lost basically every round against Joseph Parker. And then Joshua went into the ring and he won his fight handily. But the fight was off the table because of the loss. So hopefully, if Wilder is able to win and Joshua keeps doing what he does, that eventually they can still make the fight. Because it would really, Michelle, give me your opinion about that. If this era comes to a close and we never see Wilder against Joshua, however far along they are in their careers, that would still be a real shame. I still hope eventually, just for the sake of the history books, that it still happens.
Well, I feel confident that we would be able to make that happen now, especially with Deontay Wilder being a free agent. I think that opens up a lot. I mean, even today, Eddie Hearn said at the press conference that he would be very much interested in signing Deontay. So it does definitely take the political side of things away and makes it easier to pave the way to make that fight. So I do think it would be a hell of a shame if we did not ever get to see that fight happen. But I don't think that we're going to have to worry about that. I do feel pretty confident that at some stage, as long as both continue to look good and keep winning, we will be able to see that fight eventually happen.
But Deontay's going to have to start with the business on Saturday, because if he takes another loss, that's a real problem for his for his career going forward.
And Deontay knows that. Deontay knows that. I've seen quotes from other interviews that he's done this week where he's mentioned, this is do or die for him. And he knows that if he does not come out successful on the night, he could potentially end up retiring. So we will just have to wait and see what happens this weekend. We are going to go ahead and take a break. But when we come back, Dan, I really want to go ahead and get your expert opinion on the 5 versus 5 card here in Saudi Arabia. And we're back, and I'm happy to preview this weekend's fight with you, Dan, because I think that this is so exciting. It's so different, and it just adds a little bit, a little flavor into boxing with this tournament with Matchroom versus Queensberry. Obviously, the first card, and I don't know if this is the running order, okay? This is just sort of how they did the press conference today, but I definitely want to talk about Willie Hutchinson versus Craig Richard, the chef versus the keeper. What do you make of that fight?
When I saw that they made that match, I was sort of interested. I'm like, this is a very interesting, intriguing sort of the fight that I viewed. Maybe it's not the biggest in terms of the names that are available on this card and titles and things along those lines, but it's a real true crossroads kind of fight, because if you pay attention, you got Craig Richards. He's the old veteran, not old, but I mean older than Willie is. Very experienced fighter. He fights at a top level. He's fought in world championship fight against Dimitri Bivol. In my opinion, gave Bivol maybe the toughest test of his career. Barely lost that fight. He's had some setbacks because of injuries, and he had some issues there that caused layoffs. But when he did come back, finally, he looked good. Took him a few rounds to get going in his last fight, but he scored the big knockout. And now they're matching him up with Willie Hutchinson, who had one setback in his career, but is still considered by many people to be a very outstanding up-and-coming fighter. A lot of people who know the history consider him maybe the greatest amateur in Scottish history. He had a decorated amateur career, came in with a huge amount of hype as a professional. And this is really now the time for him to step up and live up to that hype. And it's up to Craig Richards to say, hey, young man, you're not ready to take that next step, but I'm still here, ready to vie for a world title. So it is that crossroads fight. The winner of this fight is going to take a monumental step forward. For Craig, it will put him back in a significant position to challenge for a world title. And for Willie, if he wins, he's going to have banked a very solid quality victory on his otherwise, somewhat thin resume. And that's what this fight's all about. So to me, it's, is it going to be youth? Is it going to be age? Is it going to be experience? Is it going to be that professional experience that Craig Richards has shown and has at a championship level? Or is Willie going to be able to take care of business because you still get that youth and that power and that enthusiasm? So it's a very interesting matchup in my mind.
It's definitely a spicy fight because the two of them seem to really have real animosity towards each other. They have to have extra security around them, just given the fact that there have been a couple of moments there where it seemed like the two were going to potentially, go at it. We definitely don't want to risk anything happening.
I've not looked at this fight sort of like that. Maybe that's what's happening because it's fight week, and obviously anytime you're in fight week, the emotions run a little bit higher than normal. But I think that both guys are pros. They know the deal. That's not going to impact the fight. They're not going to go into this fight, angry, that type of thing. They know they got a job to do, and they know the significance of what it means in their careers. And frankly, I expect both these guys to put on a pretty good show.
Okay, so for the fight fans that are watching, who are you going to pick? You have a side?
What? This is the fight where I was I've been kind of the other fights. Well, we'll get to the other ones, but I was a little on the fence with this one. But I think that I got to go with the younger guy, the more explosive guy, the quicker guy. Maybe not as experienced as Craig Richards is, but I'm rolling the dice with Willie Hutchinson on this one. I think he gets the job done and does emerge and show that he is what a lot of people thought he was coming into the professional ranks.
So the next fight, one I'm really excited for actually, is Nick Ball versus Ray Ford. Now this is going to be the first title defense for Ray's WBA title. This is Bill the Jeweler versus the Butcher. What do you make of the fight?
I love this fight. So in my Substack newsletter, Fight Freaks Unite, which people can subscribe to and go on their trusty website, I did a column earlier this week where I ranked the top, not the top, but I ranked all 5 of the 5-on-5 fights in the order that were most interesting to me personally. And while I love all the fights on the card, no doubt about it, the one that I liked the best was Ray Ford against Nick Ball. I think this is a can't-miss kind of fun fight for the fans. You mentioned it is, in fact, Ray Ford's first title defense. He was in a very dramatic, highly entertaining, very competitive fight. When he won the world title, it was the vacant WBA title back in March against Otabek Kolmatov. He was trailing on the 3 scorecards, or at least I think, I can't remember if it was on 3 or at least 2 of the scorecards. He was down, but he rallied. He scored a knockdown and stopped Kolmatov with 12 seconds left or 7 seconds left, something like that, in the late 12th round. A very rare last round comeback by knockout to win a world title. It was a very entertaining fight. And, I think that Ray is the kind of fighter, like a lot of fighters, you hear the old cliche, and I think there's something to it. When the guy wins the title, he gains more confidence. I think this is the exact scenario that Ray is involved in. So he put on that spectacular performance. Now, you look at Nick Ball. If you ever watch this guy fight, he's never in a bad fight. He's always in something exciting, something interesting. He's very aggressive. He's like a little tank, like a little spark plug, just likes to get right inside and go to work. Because he's very short compared to your average featherweight, so he needs to kind of get inside. He can't fight from the outside, so he's going to have to, really try to get in close and fight on the inside, and that makes it a fun fight. He also, as they were talking about the press conference, and Frank Warren has made a point of this ever since this fight happened, he also fought in March. That was on another one of these Saudi cards where he fought into a draw challenging the WBC champion, Ray Vargas. A lot of people thought that Nick should have come away with the victory. I was okay with the draw. It was a very, very good but close fight. I saw a draw as a distinct possibility. So their thought is, well, this should be unification, but forget about that. It's still Nick trying to go for the world title. They've been talking a good game. I just think this is going to be a very fun, high-paced, high-octane kind of fight. I love this matchup.
Okay, so then who's your pick?
I'm rolling with Ray Ford to retain the title. I just feel like he's a little bit more of a versatile guy, a little quicker, a little bigger, a lot bigger, actually. I think a better puncher. And while I give Nick Ball credit for his abilities and certainly what he did against Ray Vargas, and certainly in the fight before that, where he looked so good in the Eliminator against Isaac Dogbe, I think that Ray, though, is coming into his own right now. Top-notch amateur, great performance in the rally to win the title, and I think he's going to carry it on and win this fight on Saturday.
The next fight I'd like to talk about is Queensberry's captain, Hamza Shiraz versus Ammo Williams. Now, this one is being billed as the artist versus the mechanic, as we know that this is the WBC middleweight final eliminator to determine the next mandatory challenger for Carlos Adame's title. What's your thoughts on this fight?
Well, this is another great matchup. I mean, this is the kind of fight when they made it, it wasn't an eliminator. So I think a lot of people were like surprised that they made the match, because it's not that often where you see guys at this stage of their career, still younger fighters, undefeated. At the time, it wasn't for a title. It wasn't officially eliminator at that moment, that they were going to put that all on the line to go into this match. Obviously they're going to be highly paid for it, but to risk a lot by doing it at this stage of their career. So I love that sort of enthusiasm that the fighters showed about doing the matchup. Now that it is an eliminator, obviously it gives more stakes. Like you mentioned, the winner becomes the mandatory for Carlos Adames, who was recently elevated from the interim champion to the full WBC champion when Jermall Charlo was stripped of the title for a variety of different reasons. Look, this is another one of those fights where when I was looking at it, and if you look at the odds, most of these fights are all like pretty close in terms of, even if there's favorites and underdogs, it's not like there's no big time blowout kind of number on the odds in terms of the matchups. This is another fight that is, Ammo is the underdog, but only a little bit of an underdog. Really good matchup. Neither guy has had a lot of experience against top fighters. Both guys have looked good. Both guys have knocked opponents out. Both guys have good hand speed. I think both guys have good backgrounds. They both have obviously good teams behind them. I just love the matchup. I mean, in the middleweight division, Michelle, is interesting because at the moment, it's a pretty down division right now. It does not have stars. The guys who have the belts are not that well known, not that well loved. Janabek has two of the belts. He doesn't really have a big fan base. You got Arislani Lara, who makes a cameo, fights maybe once a year if you're paying attention. He hasn't fought a good opponent for quite a long time. It's not a deep division. Adames has been not active. He just got elevated anyway. So there's not a lot going on. But these two guys are the best up and coming guys, and they have gotten exposure. And this is a great, great matchup in my opinion. Now you're going to ask me who I think is going to win, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wanted to mention just sort of, Hamza Shiraz isn't built like a standard middleweight. He's really tall. He's 6'3". He's definitely has that size advantage. Do you see that giving him much more of an advantage over Ammo Williams, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think anytime, whether you're Hamza Shiraz or anybody, if you're taller than your opponent and you're longer than your opponent, it should be an advantage if you know how to use it. Some guys are very tall or have that long reach, but they don't really know how to use it. They don't like to fight, from the outside if they've got that long reach. They prefer to fight on the inside or duck down a little bit, fight a little bit shorter. Shiraz has struck me in the fights of his I have seen is he is happy and willing to use those physical attributes to his advantage, and it's going to be up to Austin Williams to sort of take those away from him if he can, which will require, in my estimation, him to try to get on the inside and do his damage there as opposed to fighting from long range. Right.
All right, so who's your pick?
I knew that was coming. This is the fight. This is the only fight I think that I looked at on the lineup where this was maybe in my mind the hardest pick to make of all the 5 fights when I was thinking about them. And it may not be a popular opinion with the British, but I assure you my selection of picking Ammo Williams in this fight has nothing to do with the fact that I am American. I just think that he's got a little bit more slickness to him, a little bit better technical skills. I think both guys have heart. And we're going to see. But this is not a pick that I make with a strong conviction. This is, in my mind, a 50-50 kind of fight. Yes, Shiraz is a slight favorite in terms of the betting odds. I think it's a dynamite matchup. And again, I just shade Ammo Williams a little bit. I think he's just a little bit more active, maybe a little bit quicker, but it could go either way.
All right, so you're rolling with Ammo Williams on the fight. Okay, well, moving on, we have Daniel Dubois versus Filip Hergovich. This is the suit versus the taxi driver. Now, of course, the big question around it is whether or not the IBF title is going to be on the line. But what's your thoughts on the overall matchup?
Well, like we did talk about earlier, it's probably going to wind up being for the interim title. But both guys know that at some point they're going to get some type of opportunity for a belt, whether it's this fight or in the future. And they're obviously, going to make a lot of money for this fight. But there's a lot at stake because they are, while they're not at the absolute top of the division in terms of the public, because you've got other guys up there, obviously Usyk, obviously Fury, still with the name like a Wilder, who's obviously on this card also, certainly Anthony Joshua. But these are guys that are in that next group that are trying to break through to that upper tier of the heavyweight division. Filip Hergovich has been groomed for a world title from day one. He was a big-time Olympian, won a medal, had a glorious, top-notch amateur career, and is a really good, tough fighter. He's the guy that has a win over Zhang in a close fight, but in my opinion, was a definite win for him. And, Dubois, we know the troubles he's had. He's been knocked out by Usyk going back to last summer, but he's also got good punching power. That's very clear as day. Just watch his fights. You can see him knock a lot of guys out. So this is a very interesting matchup also. I think that Hergovich, though, he's in such a great position right now, and he's going after it. And, he's not to be played around with. Now, I'm not saying you're going to play around with Dubois, but we've seen Dubois have a lot of issues with guys that are not at the same level as Filip Hergovich. For example, if you watch the fight he had against Kevin Lerena, a much smaller man, a much inferior opponent, in my opinion, he put him on the deck 3 times in the first round. And a lot of referees would have stopped the fight. Now, Dubois, he showed heart. I credit him for that. He came back, and he made the referee step in and stop that fight a couple of rounds, 2-3 rounds later, and got the win. But we also saw him completely dominated, completely taken apart by Usyk. No shame in that. Usyk is obviously the undisputed champion at the moment and an all-time great fighter. But I just feel like the background that Hergovich has, some of the experience he's had in the pros, makes him, in my mind, a notch above Dubois. Now, Dubois does have the big punching power, and you never know in the heavyweight division, especially one shot can change everything. Right. But I feel like Hergovich knows this is his moment. So, I'm going to answer your question before you ask me. I think Hergovich gets the job done. I think he stops Daniel Dubois late in this fight.
Okay. All right. And obviously the final fight of the night, Matchroom's captain, Deontay Wilder versus Zhilai Zhang, the bouncer versus the thief, as is being billed. What are your thoughts on that? Has Deontay Wilder's killer instinct back, or are we going to see a repeat of what we saw when he fought against Joseph Parker?
Well, both of these guys are in dire need of a victory, obviously, because Deontay Wilder looked terrible in the loss that he took against Parker in December. And even though Zhang, he also was coming off a loss to Parker. Now, he fought better against Parker in their March fight than Wilder did against Parker in the December fight, because even though Zhang lost, he still scored 2 knockdowns against Joseph Parker and lost, by a very close decision, whereas Wilder lost very lopsided. But as they say, Michelle, you know this, you've been around a long time, styles make fights. And I think that you asked, does Deontay have the hunger back? I think he does have the hunger back. The question I have in my mind is he going to be able to put that into practice? Is he going to be able to actually see what's he got in front of him and actually be able to throw the punches? One of the things that Deontay, when I did an interview with him, a few days ago, that he's gotten away from, that we talked about, that he knows, is that when you watch Deontay in his heyday as WBC champion, the thing that made him even tougher to fight than just the punching power was his ability to set up the right hand, because he had a spectacular jab, and he was able to use that and then come behind it with the right hand, which inevitably would knock his opponent out. Then he got away from that, and he would just basically stand there and look for one punch. Go watch the King Kong Ortiz rematch. It was all about one punch. He could not do anything else. And as he explained to me, his manager, Shelley Finkel, also spent many, many years as a manager for the Klitschko brothers. And also Vladimir Klitschko would have Deontay come to his training camp and spar with him in the early days of Deontay's professional career, because Vladimir, when he was champion, he liked to have, young studs and top young guys around to push him in the camp. So they have struck up a relationship over the years. When he lost the fight against Parker, and this fight was on the horizon, he had Shelley get him in touch with Vladimir. And Vladimir basically gave him a pep talk, told him, you got a great jab. You got to get back to using that. And I think that clicked in his mind as he explained it to me. And he's like, I do have to get back to it. They worked on it a lot in the camp. And he understands the way to pay dirt, so to speak, is to get the jab moving and then use the right hand. And so he's going to, I think, look to set that up. And the good thing for him, if you're on Team Wilder, is he's got the perfect guy in front of him to do that because Zhang is so slow. He's got a dominating, devastating straight left hand, but he's not very fast at all. He's not fleet of foot. Deontay is a much more athletic opponent, a much more quicker in terms of his hands and his feet. And I think that's going to bode well for him. So, well, we're going to see, because this is the fight, Michelle. It's Deontay's right against Big Bang's left. And I think whoever lands their money punch is going to be able to knock the other guy out. But in my estimation, it will be Deontay Wilder that, as Eddie Hearn said at the press conference, a setback is a big opportunity for a comeback. And this is going to be Deontay Wilder's comeback against Zhang on Saturday.
I think it's definitely a true test for both of them, because we do know that Zhang has one hell of a chin. So let's see how well he takes Deontay Wilder's shots. But also, Zhang has a hell of a jab.
He does. Listen, they're both good fighters, no doubt about it. But Zhang is, they're both in need of a win. Deontay, I think, is much more battle tested. He's fought better opponents. I know he didn't win all the fights. Obviously, he's got the losses to Parker and and Fury, two losses to Fury. He's younger than Zhang, who has not fought anybody up until just a couple years ago. I mean, this is a guy, when you really look at his career, his only wins of consequence are the two victories against Joe Joyce. So you have to ask yourself, is that because he was that good, or because that was just the right style made for Zhang? You mentioned that you think Zhang's got a great chin. I don't necessarily agree with that. Not that he's been knocked out or badly hurt, but he seems to react when he gets hit with every shot when he does get hit, and not necessarily in a great way. And I can guarantee you that Deontay Wilder has far superior power than anybody that's ever laid a glove on Zhang so far in his career. So we're going to find out. I mean, I don't think this is going to be a great fight, but what I think it's going to be, Michelle, is a tension-filled fight, because everybody's going to be waiting. And can Zhang land the left and can Deontay land the right, and see how they kind of are cagey trying to set that up.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I definitely want to talk about how the point system works for this fight, because I myself was a little confused. But for those who don't know, every team gets 1 point for a decision win, 2 points for a KO or TKO win, 0 points if there's a draw. And if the captains score, so if the captain, let's say Deontay Wilder knocks out or down Zhang, his points will be doubled. So we'll go from 2 to 4, and that can only happen for the captains. So if Hamza Shiraz knocks down or out Amma Williams, he will then score 4 points for the team.
Yeah, I mean, the team concept is interesting. Obviously, boxing is an individual sport, and individually, these fighters are fighting for themselves first and foremost, for their careers and for their position in the sport and for future paydays. Obviously, that's always going to take precedent in boxing. But the fact that there's also a team element involved does make it kind of interesting. It's, if you take a look at like any national team that goes to the Olympic Games, obviously the boxers they have a camaraderie, they train with each other, they support each other, and they want their team to win gold medals and that kind of thing. But they also obviously are in it individually. And this is sort of a little bit of a throwback to that, slightly contrived, but in a cool way. I think it's interesting. I mean, in today's boxing, Michelle, for some reason, there are a segment of fans that root for promoters, that root for networks, which I never quite understood. I'm about the fight, about the fighters. But if that's your thing, that's cool. This does give an added element to keeping score in terms of the points. And, listen, as well as I do, however it goes, when it's all said and done, the team, as long as it's not 2-2, the side that does win, we're not going to hear Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn, whoever the winner is, shut up for probably the next 10 years about it. Right? Am I wrong?
Eddie Hearn said that he plans to do more of these. So I think that we're going to see this become a more regular thing amongst the promoters, not just obviously Queensberry and Matchroom, but it could be, a PBC versus Golden Boy or Matchroom USA versus, Top Rank. There's so many options, but it's definitely a fun concept. It switches things up a little bit. Like I said, it's a little bit of spice back into the sport. We're going to go ahead and take a break, but when we come back, I have like a fun little compiled video where I was able to speak to those on the 5 versus 5 card as well as their teams, just some fun quick fire questions, and we're going to show that clip.
Myself. In England. It's me.
Who is your favorite fighter on the opposing team?
Oh, that's a good question.
On the opposite team, none of them.
Nick or Hamza Shearers?
Just getting smashed.
Don't be daft.
What do you mean?
Who is more likely to get knocked down or knocked out?
Zhang, yeah.
Zhang.
As we're hearing, bang bang.
Daniel Dubois.
No comment. Zhang and Deontay will be explosive.
My opponent.
One sentence, describe Frank Warren.
Don't ask me about him.
Frank Warren has made a mistake.
Old school OG.
Old geezer.
A legendary bloke, now I've got to know.
Resilient.
In one sentence, describe Eddie Hearn.
Unbelievable.
No comment.
Absolute showman of the highest level.
The enemy. Right now, he's the enemy.
Eddie Hearn can sell sand to the Arabs and ice to the Eskimos.
He's all right.
You guys are like best pals now.
The only thing is he snores a lot. I have to keep getting it in the room. I have to keep moving him out of the room.
In an arm wrestling match, who wins, Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn?
Depends what rules.
I think if we're looking at youth, it's Eddie, but experience, Frank Warren.
Eddie Hearn for sure. Come on, man. They put him on Muscle Fitness on the cover,
He's
right?
working out like crazy right now.
Eddie Hearn. He's a young guy, stud. He's a good-looking top. He's like fucking 6'9".
In an arm wrestling match, who's more likely to win, you or Eddie Hearn?
Me.
I don't go in for arm wrestling. It's got to be. I only go to the real fights.
Pound for pound, number one in your opinion.
Alexander Usyk.
You gotta give it to Usyk right now.
Alexander Usyk.
I've got to go with Usyk. Slightly in front of injury.
I like Javante Davis.
Usyk. I think Usyk. Yeah. Usyk, Crawford. They both deserve.
Alexander Usyk, hands down, easy. After what he did the other night, and then previous, then you look at his resume, incredible. Usyk, very proud of him as well.
Dan, I hope you enjoyed that video. I actually had a good laugh watching it back, although my laugh does kind of throws me back a little bit because it is a bit obnoxious, and I apologize for everyone who complains about it. But it was funny. It was funny to see who everyone was picking as even like pound for pound number one, who's going to get knocked out.
You know, listen, sometimes we all take this sport. I mean, the fighters have to take it serious. We don't have to take it that seriously. So there's always a place in my mind for a little levity. And I thought that video was hilarious with the way that some of those guys were answering their questions and some of the questions that you asked them. I totally enjoyed it. It was very fun.
Yeah, one of the funny ones, though, was when I spoke to Dmitry Bivol. He's like, I love myself. And I'm like, I love it. But speaking of Dmitry Bivol, we know, obviously, that's the setback that he had by the postponement with Artur Beterbiev. But he made it very clear with Turki Al-Sheikh that activity at this point is of the utmost importance for him in order to keep himself in top shape. So they found Malik Zinad to replace Beterbiev. What are your thoughts on Malik?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Dmitry didn't have to not fight and had to sit around and wait for Beterbiev to heal from his knee injury, because you're never guaranteed that he's going to come back in the time frame where they said. It's not uncommon for any fighter to maybe have an injury and not come back exactly on time. It seemed like this was somewhat of a serious injury. So they're saying, he's not going to be back until at least September. But at least September could mean October, could be November. Who the heck knows? That's all going to be depending on how he heals up. So Bivol wasn't going to just sit there and wait around forever. So they did go out, and to their credit, on not like a week's notice, but a couple of weeks, 3 weeks notice or so, at least get another opponent for Bivol to stay active, because he has had some layoffs in recent years, and continue to go in there and do his job and defend his title. Zinad is not a guy that I think is on the tip of the tongue of any boxing fan. He doesn't have a resume to speak of. He's fought some absolutely woeful opponents, but he has fashioned together a good record. If I'm not mistaken, he's 22-0. He's willing to take the fight. He talked a good game at the press conference. I mean, he's obviously motivated. The thing I look at when you have these scenarios, Michelle, is this. The opponent in Zinad, this is the biggest moment of his boxing life, period. But this is not even like the 15th biggest fight.
Dan, he won the lottery.
He did.
Let's call it what it is. He won the lottery.
But it's not Bivol's biggest fight by a long shot. So if he's totally up for it and has some element of skills, and Bivol, for whatever reason, might be not taking it as seriously or overlooking it, we've seen what happens in those situations. I think we can all agree Tyson Fury did not take Francis Ngannou seriously, and he almost paid the price for it. I'm not saying this is the same scenario. I'm just making the point that if you're not into it mentally and you haven't trained the right way, no matter how inferior the opponent might be, he's still capable of doing something and winning just because of heart and the fact that he is a professional. He's coming there to win. Now, I think Bivol is not a guy that ever cuts corners when he trains. He's always physically prepared. But is he mentally prepared? We'll find out. I suspect he's going to take care of business. Zinad is a guy that, is he, born in Libya, lives in Malta, not exactly two boxing hotbeds in this world. So you got to love Bivol in the fight, obviously. And if he wins, then hopefully we'll get the rematch, or not the rematch, rather, but get the undisputed fight set up in short order.
Well, Bivol has said that, Malik's confidence is what excites him. He likes that when his opponent comes in confident because he gets more excitement by just basically defeating them. I just want to give a few notes here. Zinad, obviously mentioned what a dream come true it was for him to be able to get this. He said he's felt like he's had this dream for 10 years and now it's happening for him. He said there will be an earthquake in the light heavyweight division on Saturday night. He wants Bivol's blood. We can expect lots of blood. And Bivol obviously, just smiled at that. He's a very quiet, doesn't really speak much, as you know, or doesn't really talk much trash. But Bivol said that he's excited for that. He wants that. He's expecting blood himself. And he said that he's not expecting him to be an easy opponent either, which, as you were just mentioning, I don't see Bivol ever taking any opponent lightly. But definitely, I don't know. I have a feeling that this is going to be a more exciting fight than I think some people are thinking that it'll be.
Well, I certainly hope so. But I mean, if you're familiar with Bivol and you've watched him fight, he's like a metronome. It's, you could watch the first round, you could watch the 6th round, you could watch the 10th round. They all kind of look the same. That's not a knock. That's just just the way that he fights. He's very methodical. He just goes in there, he does what he does. He's able to box and move and punch. And if he has to mix it up a little bit, he'll do it. But when it's all said and done, most of the time they read the scorecards and it's, 10-2, 9-3. Maybe a guy might win 4 rounds against him. He's very, very hard to outbox. No one's really been able to do a lot of physical damage. The one guy that was able to maybe have some success and come close to a win, but still didn't win the fight, that was Craig Richards back. You have to go back a few years ago. He took apart Canelo Alvarez. He has beaten other quality fighters. He did the job on Joe Smith, for example. He's beaten a lot of good opponents. He shut out basically Zurdo Ramirez in a fight that a lot of people thought Zurdo might have a chance to win. So again, with all due respect to Zinad, if he pulls the upset, God bless him. But I got a hard time seeing him laying a glove on Dimitri Bivol. I got a hard time seeing him win. Just maybe if he's going to win rounds, it might just be because Bivol might take a round or two off just to keep his win. But he's got he's going to be pushing a boulder uphill is the way I look at this fight for Zinad.
Well, I do hope that we do get to see the undisputed fight between Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. Just, want to talk a bit about that really quickly. Beterbiev has 4 out of his last 6 fights, and including the Bivol fight, have all gone through 5 separate health-related postponements. Is there a slight feeling that maybe, just maybe, we won't end up seeing this fight happen? Given that, Beterbiev is also 39, so it's definitely an advantage for Bivol to push it a little bit longer. But do you think that we're really going to see this fight happen?
Yeah, I do think we're going to see the fight happen because at some point, Beterbiev will be healed. I don't think it's going to take, years for him to get better. And he will come back. And when he does come back, he's going to have the belts. It's still going to be the biggest fight out there. Obviously, Bivol's got to win on Saturday. If he loses, that kind of wrecks the prospect of an undisputed fight. But yeah, I do think when he comes back, I can't tell you when that's going to be. I'm hopeful it'll be before the end of this year. If it does happen to get pushed into the early part of next year, yeah, I think the fight will still happen. It's still a meaningful fight. And even though Beterbiev has had his challenges in terms of his physical health, when he does get into the ring, he's spectacular. He makes good fights. He knocks guys out. He does show some vulnerability. He does take some shots. He's been caught. He's been knocked down. But he's got such devastating power. He's still the only active fighter in the entire sport that has won all of his fights in terms of the champions. All of his victories are by knockout. So, yeah, I do think the fight will happen. I know that Turki Al-Sheikh and the Saudis want the fight. Both sides want the fight. So, yeah, I do think it will happen.
Hopefully no more postponements, though. No more injuries on either side. Dan, thank you so much for joining me here in Saudi Arabia. I don't even know what time it is there, but it's past midnight here. And to be fair, the night's just getting started. I know that we're likely to go sit down and speak with Filip Hergovich this morning as well, seeing that we're all a bit nocturnal over here. Everyone seems to be just getting started around 9-10 p.m. and we're all up till like 5-6 a.m. I know I spoke with Eddie Hearn also earlier today, and Eddie has said the same thing. This is like really challenging for him, and it's been challenging for myself and my team as well, being up till 5-6 o'clock every morning, trying to sleep through into the early afternoon, getting up and then going through another long night. So it's not been easy, but this weekend will be worth it. 5 versus 5 live on DAZN in the United States, worldwide really, and TNT Sports in the UK. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Any last words?
Michelle, it's my pleasure. I just hope that you and everybody there get your beauty rest.
Us too. I'm excited to be going home, Dan. I've been on the road for 3.5 weeks, so it would be nice to get home back in Vegas and see my family and friends. So again, thank you so much. And we'll be speaking, obviously, on Fight Night. We're going to get your immediate reaction to the fight card. So your fight fans, you want to tune in for that. Thank you so much. And we'll speak with you guys later. Bye, fight fans.